Okay, hi, yeah, my name's Vernon. Hey, hello. Yeah, I'm the tester from Leicester, so you've guessed two things about me. I'm a tester and I'm from Leicester. I'm going to talk about BDD and how and why, as testers and software development teams, we sometimes can get addicted to BDD for the wrong reasons. But before I do that, I've kind of got to make a little bit of a disclaimer. So whilst I really love BDD and I think it's a really cool thing, I've actually not been on a team that's successfully done it properly or effectively yet. Invariably, I end up on two kinds of team. It's either a team that's trying to implement this thing and trying to get it embedded and get it working, or I end up working with a team that is doing it to one degree or another, or at least doing some of the practices, and they believe that it's correct, but actually it's bringing in a few problems, and I'm trying to help them address some of those problems. So, as I said, I'm a tester. Are there any other testers in the house? Any other testers in the house? All right, I'm on my own. Cool. Usually, in my experience, it's been testers that have been at the forefront of convincing teams to do this. Have you guys seen similar? So, I don't know about you, but I think that's because there are particular problems that we face that BDD seems to address. So, what kind of problems does a tester face in their day-to-day work? Usually, is anyone any starters for 10? Documentation not in sync. Indeed. Any other ones?
Perfect code that's got no bugs in it.
Perfect code. There you go. It's got no bugs in it. Any others? I can't see. Oh, right at the back. So that was finding out that the scenarios involved don't have. Yeah. The scenarios with the real data haven't been thought of yet, so we have to think about, what's going to happen now? So I would agree with all of those, definitely. To my mind, it comes down to maybe, you could probably categorize them in a couple of different ways. So one, you could say there is a chronic lack of information that we need to do our job. Okay, so we need to know, what the hell are we building? And why are we building it? Because quite often you just get this test. I've been in this situation, I don't know about you guys, where someone will just say, here, test the thing. And then I'm like, well, what is it? Who? What is it for? Why? What am I doing? Like at the back there, you can find yourself in a situation where, well, how do I know if what I'm seeing is a problem or not? And again, BDD seems to address that because you're supposed to think of all these awesome scenarios ahead of time that will solve that problem. And then another problem is, well, what's the scope of my work? So what do people want to know about this thing? So are we doing performance testing on a very simple app that's going to be used by 2 people? Or are we not doing security testing on the new banking app that doesn't have any blockchain technology implemented, so people are going to be in serious danger if we don't do that security testing? Another problem that I've seen, and it's kind of, I was doing this since 2002, software testing, and the problem has stayed the same, it just manifests itself differently, and that is that as software testers, we sometimes have a bit of an identity crisis or self-esteem issues. So when I started back in 2002, literally a business person would just talk to somebody called a BA, and they would frantically try and scribble stuff down, and then they would try and put that into some coherent text, and they would lob that over at some architect person, and then they would try and say, okay, technically I need to do this, this, and this, and stuff would just keep getting thrown down the line, and it arrive in your lap, and you've had no interaction with anybody, so you don't really know what's going on. You're not really treated as being part of the team. And you fast forward now to 2017, whereas all the speakers have mentioned that we're doing continuous, whatever it is this week, we're doing DevOps, which is all about tools and tools and more tools, and we may not necessarily be comfortable with that. You might be an aesthete, you might not, and if you're not, you'll be like, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? I haven't got any Scooby-Doo where I'm supposed to fit in. Because BDD seems to be about eliciting really good information, and one of the outputs seems to be things that look like tests, it feels like we've been put right at the heart of the matter when it comes to writing, when it comes to doing BDD. And that makes us feel good. It's like, finally, we're getting some respect out here, man. It's like, good. Sick and tired, have to deal with this shit. Okay? And as I said before, we like tools. We're software developers of one flavor or another. We're all nerds to one degree, or not, or geeks. So that's not offending anybody. I think I'm a geek. It's all good. So BDD gives us an opportunity to use a lot of different tools. So we had Aslak up here talking about Cucumber, obviously. But you've got other things like Capybara. You've got other things like SpecFlow, that probably implement things like Selenium or Nightwatch or whatever your tool is of choice that's going to drive your application. And then you've got to implement that in some kind of code. So you might be using Ruby, you might be using PHP, C#, whatever, like anything. So that kind of scratches that itch that we've got, especially with the backdrop of we've got to DevOps all the things and we've got to be using tools to be valuable. So that will cause us to kind of evangelize about BDD. I call myself a test evangelist, which is a bit, I just realized my dad's a vicar, so that's a bit weird, me saying I'm a test evangelist. I probably shouldn't have done that. So we're on a team, we've sold it, we've convinced everyone to do BDD. Now that can have some good consequences, it can have some bad consequences. So some of the things that can happen as a result where you're like too successful at this thing is that the business are now expecting everything that you do to be written with given when then syntax, with Gherkin syntax. They will want all of the testing to manifest itself in a feature file that will be automated, that will tell you if this thing is working or not. You can get the illusion that you're doing BDD really, really easily. Like I say, sometimes as testers, we can be in a situation where we believe our most visible output are the number of test cases or the number of bugs that we produce. Now, because these feature files can easily be confused for test cases, and they've got a kind of pass-fail element to them, we can kind of get in a situation where, so long as we've created some feature files for whatever reason, it looks like we're covered as far as the testing is concerned. And that may not be the case, and we can leave ourselves exposed to other kinds of problems later on. So what I've seen that result in, and people can easily get attached to those things. And what I've seen that result in is, I mean, I called it addiction, and I had this whole ridiculous definition of what addiction is. It's a blah, 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 a brain disorder, and this, that, and the other, blah, blah. But really what I'm talking about are habits that people just do without consciously thinking all the time. So at the moment, it's Ramadan at the moment, and I'm Muslim, so I'm fasting at the moment. And part of that is that you're not supposed to eat any food, like absolutely nothing, nil by mouth. But because I know it's a bit of a surprise because of my svelte and slim frame, that actually I quite like food. And so on my desk is usually arrayed all manner of tasty treats and snacks. And I'll find myself, while I'm fasting, if I'm not sharp and I've not got rid of it, I'll just be working away and I'll just reach for a cookie or I'll just reach for a sweet and I'll eat it without even thinking about it. It's just a habit. I just want to eat. I'm just addicted to that. I just want that cookie. I'm just used to doing that all the time. And that's how I see our use of BDD sometimes. So the tool we've got to hand is BDD. And so that's the tool we're going to use to solve all of the problems. And we stop asking questions, which I think is a mistake, because I don't think BDD is a solution to a testing problem. So when people reach for it, they may not be in the appropriate context to make it work effectively. So they might be on a team that doesn't collaborate. So we've all heard that silos are bad. And whether you agree with that or not, imagine you've got a silo. I've worked on teams where this is almost literally true. You've got a silo that's not just a silo. The silo has barbed wire on it. It's got cannon at the top. It's surrounded by a moat of burning hot lava with with fire-resistant sharks in the lava. And if I'm a tester in my silo and anyone approaches who's not a tester, then there's people on the battlements to take them out. It's like there's absolutely zero collaboration. Now, just by introducing BDD into that situation, you're probably not going to have much success without doing any collaboration. Okay, it's not going to help you in that scenario. Another aspect of BDD is the automation part. So if you've got a brittle and non-deterministic application that you're trying to get information by, you're trying to test with, interact with, and you think to yourself, I probably want to do some automation on this and help solve that problem. BDD might be able to help, but there might be other things that you can do to help address that problem a little bit more directly and a little bit more easily, a little bit more effectively. Or you might work in a regulated industry. So I've worked in different industries such as telcos, life sciences, banking, all kinds of different flavors of finance. And these are all regulated, and you have to demonstrate that the work items are traceable. You have to be able to demonstrate that I worked on this thing and it does work because I've done these things. And so when you see a way of working that can give you things written in very easy to understand English, that the computer says, yes, this works, that can be a very attractive proposition. Again, but you might not need to do that. And again, like I said before, it's not a solution to an automation problem, but people often want to do automation because it is valuable and because it does help. The problem is that people often equate automation with GUI automation, which isn't necessarily the fastest, most effective, most reliable way to do things. But everyone else is doing automation, so we must do the automation as well. And BDD gives you that too, so people get excited about that. It's written in English, and I can automate it. Awesome. Now, misusing BDD in those kind of scenarios can give you a whole bunch of problems, such as feature files that check too many things at once. I don't know if you've seen this, but I've worked on teams where you have your feature file, and it's got a background in it, and it's got scenarios. And I have seen feature files with backgrounds in it that are 200 lines long. 200 plus lines long. Just think about the horror of that. Now, why is that? Probably because they're equating feature files to tests, and they write them in what I like to call tester-ese. So instead of talking in a way where you're just talking about the functionality and you're not really too worried about how it's implemented, we go all in for the implementation. So given instead of saying, given I want to get access to a thing, when I log in with as a valid person, then I get to this part of the application, whatever. You'll see things written like, given I navigate to this page, when I enter this into the username field, and then I enter something else into the password field, and I click the button that says login, then I should blah, 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 and it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. That's not great. That's not really how you're supposed to do that. And also, when we're talking about how wonderful BDD is going to be, we probably don't talk about some of the other things that we're getting along with that. So you've got your feature file, which is written in English, and you've got your application. And then you need some code in the middle to stick those two things together. That doesn't write itself. Somebody has to do that. And that's some work that you're signing up for. And so you need to factor that in when you're selling it, that we're actually signing up for more work than we anticipated. So how can you avoid some of these problems? So one thing I like to do, one way I like to phrase it is you need to channel your inner Liz Keogh. So when I was learning about BDD way back when, I seen a lot of material from a lot of different people I came to a couple of Q-Cups, met Matt, heard Liz and Dan North speak, and one of the things that Liz said that really stood out is that there are 3 aspects to BDD. You've got to be having the conversation, you've got to capture the conversation, and you've got to automate the conversation. Where people get very hype and very excited about automating, but if you're not capturing the conversation that you're not having, then it's basically not BDD. Might still be getting some value from it, but you're not doing BDD, and you're not getting all the good, rich stuff that comes along with it. So remember that. Start with having the conversation first. Don't worry about whether you're using Gherkin syntax or not. Just have the conversations, get into that groove. If you're not really collaborating, you can do things like you can pair. You can review and demo things to other people in the team more frequently to get people interested in what you're doing and what it is that's been delivered. And you can share your testing ideas on this story with people a little bit sooner. Instead of just accepting the fact that things get thrown over the wall, you can initiate the interaction. So there was a chap speaking in the lightning talks earlier on who was talking about going and wrestling and showering and stuff with people. That might be going a bit too far. Could be a HR issue. I would stick to things like pairing, reviews, demos. If you want to get extra fruity and take it to the next level afterwards, I'll leave that with you guys to figure that out. If you've got brittle and non-deterministic apps that are difficult to understand and get your head around, that probably says more about your application than it does about the testing. So are you doing TDD? Are you refactoring your code effectively? Is there a way you can get faster feedback about the changes that you're making so you can find out about this breakage that happens over here even though you're working over here? And don't forget that you still actually need to test the application. So I believe Liz was talking about Kinevin earlier on. There are some things that will only emerge with time, so you can't predict them up front. So you still need to interact with the product somehow. So whether that's you interacting or whether you're got some really cool, effective monitoring in place where you can get information on people interacting with your product, that needs to happen because you can't predict everything up front ahead of time. I'll draw a quick diagram. Can everyone see this whiteboard okay? Okay, so a friend of mine by the name of James Lindsay came up with this diagram to explain testing to people. You can have this, which is what you've explicitly asked for, and then you have this second circle, which may or may not be overlapping to one degree or another, which is what you've got. So ahead of time, you're probably exploring more of this circle and moving things from here into there when you're doing your workshops and things. You're trying to understand, okay, I've got a banking app. Does it need to work on BlackBerry? Yes, it does. It goes in there. You've got some kind of highly performant application. So how many users it actually need to work with? Okay, I'm going to put it in there. That's all well and good. And then after that, you now need to give it to an actual person to interact with, whether it's a tester or an actual customer in production. It doesn't really matter. And they're going to be exploring this stuff in here, which is the stuff that you got, or the behavior that you got, that you didn't actually ask for. Right? So you need to figure out what's going on in there, but actually it's not 2 circles, it's 3, because there's another one there. And these are the implicit requirements that nobody either thought that they should tell you or didn't know that that's actually what they wanted. So I've often been in situations on teams where I'll reveal some behavior. I mean, taking it away from software for a moment, has anyone ever moved house with their significant other before? I've done that. Yeah. And you might get in a situation where you might get, so, well, I think the sofa should go over there. So you go, oh, okay, right. So you'll drag it over there. You know, you're fasting, so you're weak, so it's really difficult. You pull it over there. And you go, right, it's awesome. And then you'll be told, actually, look better over there. Now, that's not because people are trying to yank your chain. It's just people need to see and feel and taste what it looks like. They thought it might look good over there, but it actually doesn't look good over there, and they want you to put it back. Also, they may not even think that this is a problem they need to tell you about. This application, so I've worked on teams where you're building a CMS for a bank. Now, it might be a little bit presumptuous, but the odds are they're probably using some dilapidated version of Internet Explorer. But nobody thought to tell you that. So when you do all your testing, you're using an actual browser. But when they get this application, it doesn't work. But nobody thought to tell you that, because they're like, well, obviously, we're a bank. That's Internet Explorer, that's how we roll. Whereas you're thinking, it's 2017, what are you talking about? I'm going to be using this thing on Chrome or Firefox or something sensible. And they're the things that usually come back and kick you in the, yeah, you know what's. So that's my take on it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use BDD. You absolutely should use BDD. It is a tool in your toolkit, so understand how to use it, but don't just use it for absolutely everything, because it may not be appropriate for absolutely everything. That is it. I don't know if I've got time for questions or not. Do I have time for questions or not?
Yeah, because I just told them to share 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah, so there's 5 minutes. I can either leave, or you can pass comment or judgment or ask questions. I don't mind.